1. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, a problem right now with journalism is that it's largely gate-kept and outcome dependent on these big institutions being able to do it right and being able to cover these breaking stories. But as what we've seen with all of the geopolitical news happening over the past few days, there's huge room and opportunity for people to feel a part of that and people to directly be a part of that coverage. We have to understand that this is a world reset, and we think that in a world wherein more people have a lens of looking at journalism from that degree of specialization, what we ultimately get is democratization and decentralization of journalism, wherein we're able to lower the barrier of entry for that, because I'm pretty sure all of us here took a college degree that specialized or majored in a particular field. Meaning, we're able to forward this idea of citizen journalism, wherein more people are literally able to be opt into it, as opposed to the comparative on-side opposition, wherein, hey, journalism's only for you if you took up mass comm or mass communication, or, guess what? Bachelor of Science or Arts in freaking journalism. The opposite is more likely, and more particular people on our side are going to be able to opt into that. That is the heart of closing government extension. A few strategic observations of top half thus far. Number 1, opening government is correct with some of their characterization and impact, but I'm not entirely sure they're able to fully demonstrate or mechanize those things because they kind of jump into it. Meaning, there's still a particular difference between this minimal training you get on government and on op, which is like status quo, a 4-year degree in mass comm or journalism. And we think the simple trade-off we're willing to make is, on our side, you don't have to go into this 4-year program where you go super duper particularly wide and you cover all of these things, but it's more of an inch deep, mile wide approach, wherein regardless of who you are in your particular background, because most people do have a degree, most people do have a job, which is probably freaking specialized, is exactly the point in which we're able to harness on that particular society in terms of how it works, given that this is a world reset, democratizing that idea. We think that journalism ultimately has been gate-kept for far too long, and particularly on our side, more people are likely to be able to opt into this particular thing and be able to be a part of. Meaning, the advent and rise of things like citizen journalism, especially amidst a lot of these particular news stories and things happening all around the world, being particularly important. Because something that top half missed is a very simple question of, what exactly is journalism for? We think it's twofold. 1, to be able to inform the public. 2, to be able to interpret these particular things. But we have to ask a question. How do these news stories come to be to begin with? Meaning, whether it be a ceasefire in Iran or whether it be an Air India plane crashing, a lot of these things tend to be breaking news or developing stories at the point in which we want more eyeballs there in order to be able to potentially cover these particular things. And what I'm saying is that in a world reset, wherein the barrier or lens of looking at journalism is more broad, wherein you are a specialist, of which majority of people are with their jobs and with their degrees, are literally now able to kind of opt into journalism and start posting things on X, start posting things on social media as a means of being able to partake in that. But in instances where they do get a professionalized degree, it just allows an easier opt-in to people to go into that, as opposed to in the comparative and status quo, like I said in my pre-oration, are largely a smaller pool of people who are just mass comm or advertising particular students who go into that degree. The impact here is that we're literally able to give the people who view these particular things a more proximate interest in terms of being able to see these particular stories. Because a huge problem that you have in status quo is a shitload of redundancy and bureaucratic processes. Guys, if you watch any big news agency, the status quo general journalist guy, what do? They interview an expert and ask for their opinion. I think it would be particularly much better and faster if that particular expert were to be able to do it themselves. Note that opening government does say this, but they aren't able to fully explain it. Let me mechanize the process of what really happens in this minimalist training to be comparative to side opposition. What exactly happens here is you, of course, have some degree of training in public speaking, in rhetoric, in presenting yourself and carrying yourself out. So it won't be this like nerdy guy shouting and spitting facts that opening opposition sort of accuses us for. Because on both sides, you still have an incentive to be able to obviously communicate this in a particularly decent way in order for those things to particularly work. Even if that's not necessarily the case, we think we still have middlemen, people in social media, the average people, and content creators to help translate and make those things better. Before that, POI, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So, but you mentioned how they get only little training, but don't you think that it will just be a speed run and like fake qualifications so that they can publish their achievements?
No, because to get a job, you gotta go to school. And I'm pretty sure in primary school, high school, college, we all learn a lot of this basic shit anyway in order for us to be able to do that. Plus, you have orgs, you have real life touching grass to help you do that. Meaning, if opening opposition is so worried about like these particular people locking in and being potentially biased, which by the way is a really strong push from opening up, but that I don't think opening government necessarily answered, we have a couple of responses. A, their reputation is on the line, so they have every interest to like think things through and not have like some sellout biased lens. B, yes, particular biases do exist, but we think experts exist on a spectrum, meaning the Overton window of capacities. Of course, you're going to have someone more conservative, more moderate, more radical, and we think that a lot of these things are able to still have discourse, and you ultimately are able to make more informed decisions. C, we think particularly in the worst case that they're able to take a controversial stance, we rather have a sharp, hard-line controversial view as opposed to some let's wait and see, general, vague kind of approach that make it harder for particular people on the ground in order to make safe and informed decisions, especially when a lot of these breaking things are so urgent. For all these reasons, we are very proud to stand on side proposition.